The advertising business is facing a bit of a slowdown this year as companies rein in their budgets. But are we in for a rebound heading into 2024, especially with the presidential election? Our next guest has key insight as hundreds of Fortune 500 companies use his company's data and analytics to drive ad effectiveness. Joining us now is DoubleVerify CEO Mark Zagorski. So, Mark, let me start with this, just your 30,000-foot view, Mark, of that digital ad market. How healthy is it right now, Mark, and what do you see ahead the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I think this year has been a story, tale of two different ad markets. The year started off pretty rough with Ukraine and interest rates dragging on the business. I think we're ending the year with a slightly more optimistic tone, despite global kind of challenges that are out there. You've got an election year coming up. You've got the continued explosion of short form video, retail media networks, et cetera, that are driving ad demand. So I think from a macro perspective, things look a lot better at this time of the year than they did last year at this time.
Mark, what are the big structural changes you've seen in the ad market sort of pre and post pandemic?
Yeah, I mentioned a few of those. The first is, one of these things, the emergence of what's called retail media networks. So a lot of the folks that actually are in the business of selling stuff, so Amazon, Instacart, Macy's, retailers, actually using the data about those sales to build ad businesses. We've seen everyone from Uber to, as I mentioned, Instacart get into the ad business. I think that's one of the changes that we've seen since pandemic. And I think the other big ones really have to do around video and the consumption of video, both the emergence of connected television. And Netflix has been really in the news this week about how they are focusing on advertising, and the consumption of video in short form, driven by TikTok, but now also folks like Meta Reels and YouTube Shorts getting into the short form video game. So lots of changes have attracted totally different ad dollars into the space and changed the way people are engaging.
And Mark, how much of an issue is fraud still when it comes to digital advertising?
Yeah, fraud is something we know really well. DV's been in the business of rooting out fraud for over a decade. We've got a committed, team of folks in our DV fraud lab that look for things for bad players. And to be direct, it's one of these things where it's a game of whack-a-mole. Once we find one fraud scheme and look to eliminate it for our customers, another one pops up. It's pervasive, and unfortunately, the emergence of AI tools and the growing implementation of AI in the digital ad space has only made the fraudsters more aggressive and given them, more powerful weapons to go out and try to steal ad dollars from legitimate advertisers.
And then what are the implications of that as well, not just when it comes to ad fraud, but to misinformation more broadly?
Yeah, there's an interesting connection between, and especially as we're talking around election season, between fraud and misinformation and disinformation. A lot of the fraud that we see is perpetrated is not some kid in his basement trying to steal a few bucks from a big brand by misdirecting ads. These are pretty sophisticated criminal enterprises. In many cases, they're funded by groups or governments that are looking to use that money that they steal to build fake profiles, fake social media profiles, and propagate more misinformation and disinformation. So there's a connection between the criminal element of fraud and the actual, continued, preponderance of misinformation and disinformation, particularly when it comes to election seasons. And we saw this 2 years ago during the U.S. midterms, and we expect to see an increase in both areas in the next 2 years around the 24 elections.
Mark, for advertisers, I'm curious to get your take. Are there too many social media platforms at this point? You got, X and Threads and TikTok, list goes on. Too many options?
Advertisers, there's two people that will determine if there's too many options: consumers and advertisers, right? If consumers start to shy away from one platform or another, the ad dollars will then follow them, to places where they're going. I think right now consumers are still trying to figure out what works for them. I mean, you have Threads, which was recently launched. You have an increasing number of short form video platforms that are out there. They're splitting their time, but I think with everything, with all emerging media, you see an explosion of different channels and then a consolidation. We've seen this across connected television. I think we're going to see it across social as well over time. There's only so much content consumers can consume, and there's only so many places advertisers can spend. So I think we are probably ripe for a consolidation at some point in the next 18 to 24 months.
Mark, where are advertisers on what platform are advertisers getting their best ROI right now? And what does that look like? In other words, how do they measure that?
Yeah, it's, I hate to be, very broad, but it depends. Advertisers, some are looking to drive brand awareness, some are looking to actually drive an acquisition of a customer, and some are looking to drive product sales. And depending on that ultimate goal, different media is working different way. And I think that's, the question previously is directly related to that. What they're finding is certain social platforms, so short form video, for example, across TikTok or Meta Reels or YouTube Shorts, works really well for brand lift and brand awareness because it's sight, sound, and motion. But we're seeing other platforms such as traditional social and traditional ads, banner ads, impressions work really well for client acquisition because they're cheap and you can spread a lot of them out there to drive direct responses. So I think it still depends on what the advertiser's goal. One thing that is clear is advertisers are getting much better at kind of closing that loop and tracking what's working for them. And you're seeing dollars shift very quickly to areas that work well.
Mark Zagorski from Double Verify. Mark, thank you for stopping by.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.